Susan Miller straightened her blue diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. The air in the massive council chamber felt thin and cold. It smelled strange, too, like metal and something sweet that she couldn't name. Around her, hundreds of alien beings sat in rising tiers of seats. They whispered and clicked and hummed in dozens of languages. Some had too many eyes. Some had no eyes at all. Some looked almost human, and somehow that was worse. Susan was just one woman from Earth. Just one human standing before the most powerful gathering in the known galaxy. Her mouth felt dry. "The human will now speak," announced a tall, thin alien with pale blue skin. Its voice boomed through the chamber, helped by hidden speakers. "The human will explain why its primitive species has violated the borders of the glorious Tarvaxian Empire." Susan stepped forward to the speaking platform. A small light blinked green, showing that her translator was working. Whatever she said would be changed into the 27 main languages of the Council. "Thank you, High Chancellor," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Good. I am Ambassador Susan Miller of Earth. I represent all humans across our home world, and our young colonies." The High Chancellor, Lord Vaxter, looked down at her with his 6 yellow eyes, 3 on each side of his narrow face. He seemed bored. The Tarvaxians had ruled space for over 4,000 years. To them, humans were just another small problem to solve. "We know who you are," said Lord Vaxter. "What we do not know is why. You refuse to accept your punishment. Your ships entered our space. They were destroyed, as is our right. Now you will submit to our rule as is proper." Susan nodded slowly. She pressed a small button on her wrist device. Above the platform, a large screen appeared in the air. It showed 3 ships. They were large, round, white. They looked like flying cities. "These are the ships that your forces destroyed 6 months ago," Susan said. "They were traveling to the star system you call Sector 882. We call it Epsilon. Eridani." "Yes," said Vaxetur. "They ignored our warnings. They entered our space without permission. The punishment was fair." Susan touched her device again. The image changed. Now it showed the inside of one of the ships. There were parks with trees, schools full of children, hospitals, homes, gardens, swimming pools. "These were colony ships," Susan said. "They carried 50,000 people, families, children, doctors, farmers, teachers." She paused. "They were not warships. They were not soldiers. They were our people looking for a new home." A low murmur ran through the council chamber. Many of the alien representatives leaned forward. Some spoke quickly to each other. "This is not relevant," said Vaxtur. His voice was harder now. "Your ships violated our territory. Whether they carried warriors or not does not matter." Susan looked directly at him. "It matters to us," she said. "You didn't attack our military. You didn't destroy our weapons." She took another breath. "You attacked our home. You killed our families." The chamber grew quiet. Very quiet. Even the soft sounds of breathing and movement seemed to stop. Lord Vaxter stared at her. His outer eyes blinked rapidly. "Explain," he said finally. "In human culture," Susan said, "we consider an attack on civilians, on regular people who are not soldiers, to be much worse than an attack on military targets, especially an attack on children." She gestured to the images still floating above her. There were 20,000 children on those ships. A tall alien with green skin and 4 arms stood up from one of the lower tiers. "High Chancellor, may I speak?" Its voice sounded like glass breaking. "The Zextel representative may speak," said Vaxter. He seemed distracted, his eyes still fixed on Susan. "Is it true?" asked the green alien. "Do humans truly value their young ones and non-warriors above their fighters?" "Yes," said Susan. "We train our soldiers to expect danger, to face death if necessary. But our children, our families, they are innocent. They are our future. To harm them is the greatest crime in our culture." Now the chamber was filled with noise. Dozens of representatives were standing, talking all at once. Some seemed angry, others confused. A few looked afraid. Lord Vaxtur raised one long-fingered hand and silence fell again. Human, he said. His voice had changed. It was careful now, cautious. In the history of the Tarvaxian Empire, we have encountered over 300 spacefaring species. None of them placed higher value on their non-warriors than on their fighters. Susan nodded slowly. I understand this is different for you, but for us it is fundamental. Those colony ships carried our hopes, our dreams, our children. She looked around the chamber. When you destroyed them, you did not strike at our strength. You struck at our heart. A very old Tarvaxian, his blue, skin faded almost to white, hobbled forward from behind the High Chancellor. He whispered something in Vaxtur's ear. The High Chancellor's eyes widened. The Council will recess, announced Vaxtur suddenly. We will reconvene in 3 hours. As the alien representatives filed out, many of them looked back at Susan. Some with curiosity, some with what might have been respect, a few with clear hostility. Susan sat down heavily on a small bench. Her legs felt weak. A human aide rushed over with water. What just happened? Asked the aide, a young man named Paul. Susan took a long drink. I think, she said slowly, I just told them that they've been fighting wars wrong for 4,000 years. She looked up at the now empty seats rising above her. And I think some of them are starting to believe me. On the other side of the chamber, Lord Vaxtur was surrounded by advisors. All of them were talking at once. The old Tarvaxian who had whispered to him stood silent, watching Susan with ancient eyes. The archives, the old one said finally, his voice cutting through the noise. We must consult the archives. If what the human says is true, then everything we have done. He didn't finish the sentence. Susan watched them leave. She didn't know what would happen next. She only knew that for the first time in recorded history, the mighty Tarvaxian Empire looked unsure. All because of one simple truth that humans had always known. You don't hurt children. You don't attack homes. Sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't weapons at all. Sometimes they're just ideas. Back on Earth, General Alan Foster looked at the large screen that showed the council chamber. He stood in the main room of Earth Defense Command, a wide underground space filled with computers and people working quickly. The air smelled of coffee and the sweat of people who had been working too long without rest. How is Susan doing? Alan asked. Lisa Wright looked up from her screen. Her eyes were tired but alert. They just called a break in the meeting. I think she shocked them, sir. Alan nodded. He was a tall man with short gray hair. His uniform was dark green with 3 stars on each shoulder. He had been a soldier for 30 years, but nothing had prepared him for this. Dealing with aliens, who could wipe out Earth if they wanted to. Did they seem angry? Threatened? He asked. Lisa shook her head. More like confused. The main alien, the one with 6 eyes, he looked like someone had just told him the sky wasn't blue. Interesting, said Alan. He turned to the man sitting at a desk covered with strange objects. Kevin, what do you think? Dr. Kevin Parker looked up. He was studying something that looked like a metal spider. It was actually a toy from the Tarvaxian Empire, one of many alien items he had collected to understand their culture. I think Susan just gave them a cultural shock, Kevin said. The Tarvaxians are a warrior society. Their whole culture is built around fighting and honor. To them, attacking a military target is a sign of respect. And attacking civilians? Asked Lisa. Kevin shrugged. From what we can tell from their history, they think it's merciful, quick and clean. They don't understand why we would be more upset about losing civilians than soldiers. Alan walked to the big window that looked out over the secret base. Outside, under the bright lights, workers were finishing a large ship. It was sleek and dark, unlike the white colony ships. This one was built for war. How long until the Defender is ready? He asked a woman who stood nearby looking at a tablet. 2 days, sir, said the woman. Maybe less if we push the crews harder. Alan nodded. Do it. And the other 5 ships? A week. Maybe 2. Not good enough, said Alan. I need them ready in 5 days. The council meeting might not go well. The truth was, humans had been preparing for this moment for years, ever since they found a crashed alien ship in Arizona 20 years ago. They had taken the technology and studied it in secret. They had built engines that could travel faster than light, weapons that could cut through almost anything, shields that could stop most attacks. But they had only 6 ships ready, or almost ready. The Tarvaxian Empire had thousands. "Sir," said Lisa suddenly. "Susan is calling." Alan turned back to the main screen. Susan's face appeared. She looked tired but excited. "Alan, are you there?" she asked. "I'm here. How's it going?" Susan smiled a little. "I think I just turned their world upside down. They've called a break to discuss what I said." "Do they believe you?" asked Alan. "Some do, some don't. But they're all talking about it." She looked over her shoulder. "I don't have much time. There's something else. I met a representative from another species during the break. One called the Zextel. She said there are others who have suffered from misunderstandings with the Tarvaxians." Alan frowned. "Potential allies? Maybe. The Zextel representative, her name is Zexalia. She wants to meet privately after the council session." "Be careful," said Alan. "It could be a trap." Susan nodded. "I know, but I think she's genuine. She seemed sad when I showed the images of the colony ships like she'd seen it before." The call ended as someone off-screen called Susan's name. Alan stared at the blank screen for a moment. "What do you think?" asked Lisa. "I think we need those ships ready," said Alan. "And I think we need to learn more about these Zextel." Kevin was already typing on his computer. "Not much in the data we've gathered. They're a reptile-like species, part of the Empire for about 800 years. They control 12-star systems, but used to have more." 3 hours later, the council meeting started again. Back on Earth, everyone at Defense Command watched the screens. Susan walked to the speaking platform again. This time, the room was completely silent. No whispers, no movement. Lord Vaxter looked different somehow. His eyes moved constantly, and his long fingers tapped on the arm of his chair. "Human ambassador," he said. His voice was careful. "Our scholars have been examining your claims. They have also been reviewing your species' historical records. You claim to value civilian life above military, yet your own history is filled with warfare and conquest." Susan nodded. "You're right. Humans have fought many wars. We've made terrible mistakes. But we've learned from them. We've grown." She touched her device again, and new images appeared above her. "These are from our worst war. We call it World War II. The images showed destroyed cities, dead people in the streets, children crying. After this war, we created new rules, new laws, about how to fight if we must fight at all. We decided that civilians must be protected, that children must never be targets." She touched her device again. Now the screen showed the families from the colony ships, people smiling, children playing, a birthday party with candles on a cake, a wedding with flowers. "Our military exists to protect these people, not the other way around," Susan said. "When you destroyed those colony ships, you didn't strike at our warriors. You struck at the very heart of what we value most." The silence in the room grew deeper. Several of the older Tarvaxians seemed to be breathing hard. Their blue skin had turned almost gray. One of them suddenly stood up. He was wearing complicated robes with many symbols. "If what you say is true," he said in a shaking voice, "then we have not been engaging in honorable warfare. We have been, what is your term, murderers." The word echoed in the huge room. Many of the alien representatives looked shocked. Some looked down at their hands or whatever they had instead of hands. A few nodded slowly. Lord Vaxter raised his hand for silence. "This is a serious matter that requires further discussion. The human concept is disturbing. We must consult our oldest laws and histories." The old Tarvaxian who had whispered to Vaxter earlier stepped forward again. "I have consulted the archives," he said. His voice was thin but strong. "In our most ancient texts, from before the Empire began, there is a saying, 'The warrior who Harms the nestling has no honor. We have forgotten this teaching. The council erupted in voices, some angry, some confused. Through it all, Susan stood quietly. She caught the eye of Zexalia, the reptilian diplomat, who gave her a small nod. Something was changing in the great Galactic Council. Something that had been the same for thousands of years was beginning to shift. And it had all started with a simple human idea. You don't attack homes. After the council meeting ended for the day, Susan walked down a long hallway with walls that seemed to glow softly. Her legs felt tired. She had been standing for hours, answering questions from many alien representatives. Some had been angry. Most had been confused. "Ambassador Miller?" came a soft voice from behind her. Susan turned to see the reptilian diplomat, Zexalia. Up close, she was taller than Susan had thought. Her skin was green with patches of gold. Her eyes were large and yellow with black slits down the middle. She wore robes of deep blue with silver patterns. "Yes, I'm Susan Miller," said Susan. Zexalia looked up and down the hallway. "May we speak privately? What I have to tell you is sensitive." Susan nodded. "My quarters are just ahead." Inside her small room on the space station, Susan offered Zexalia a seat. The alien sat carefully on the edge of a chair made for human shapes. "What I am about to tell you could get me killed," Zexalia said. Her voice was low. "But after what you said in the council, I must speak." Susan sat across from her. "I'm listening. My species, the Zextel, once controlled 30 star systems, not just 12, Zexalia said. "We were a peaceful people, scientists mostly. We explored space out of curiosity." She blinked her large eyes slowly. 800 years ago, the Tarvaxians came. They said we had entered their space. They destroyed 3 of our colony worlds. Susan felt cold. "Just like they did to us." "Yes. But we had no military ships, no weapons to fight back. We surrendered at once." Zexalia's voice grew sad. "We became part of their empire. We lost our best worlds. We now serve them as scientists and doctors." "I'm sorry," said Susan. "Your situation is different," said Zexalia. "You have been building ships in secret, ships with weapons." She held up a hand as Susan started to speak. "No, do not deny it. Many species in the council know this. There are always watchers." Susan said nothing. "But that is not what I came to tell you," continued Zexalia. "What matters is that you have shown the council something they have never seen before. A species that values its young ones above its warriors. This has caused confusion." "I noticed," said Susan. "It is more than confusion. It is a crisis." Zexalia leaned forward. "The Tarvaxians have conquered hundreds of worlds by destroying civilian ships and cities, always thinking they were being merciful, always thinking they were showing respect by not attacking military targets first." Susan shook her head. "That's horrible." "Yes. But now they question their whole history. The old archivist who spoke, today he is greatly respected. If he says they have forgotten their ancient laws—" She made a gesture with her clawed hand. "Many will listen. There are already whispers in the council. Many subject species are wondering what this means." Back on Earth, Lisa Wright stared at her computer screen. She had been searching through the data they had gathered about the Tarvaxian Empire. "General," she called. "I found something." Alan walked over. "What is it?" "I've been looking at the Tarvaxian military records we managed to access," said Lisa. "Over the past 4,000 years, they've conquered at least 300 other species." "We knew that," said Alan. "Yes, but look at the pattern." Lisa pointed to a chart on her screen. "In every case, they first destroyed civilian targets, cities, colony ships, places with families. Then they waited for the military response. When it came, they offered a chance to surrender. Kevin joined them, looking over their shoulders. And if the analysis of their culture is right, they thought they were being honorable, merciful even. But why would they think that?" asked Alan. Kevin frowned, thinking. "In their culture, warriors are everything. To die in battle is the highest honor. Maybe they thought they were saving the warriors from that fate, giving them a reason to surrender without fighting. Lisa's eyes widened. So they've been trying to be merciful, but doing exactly the wrong thing by human standards. By the standards of most species, I would guess, said Kevin. I don't think the Tarvaxians are the only ones who value their children highly. We need to tell Susan, said Alan. This changes everything. Changes. In her quarters on the space station, Susan was reaching the same conclusion with Zexalia's help. So for thousands of years, the Tarvaxians have been winning wars by our standards, but losing them by their own? Susan asked. It seems so, said Zexalia. Their ancient code, the one the archivist mentioned, it values mercy and honor above all. Somewhere in their history they began to believe that sparing warriors was merciful. And no one ever told them different? Asked Susan. Who would dare? Zexalia's scales rippled in what might have been a shrug. They are the most powerful force in the galaxy. And until you, no one has ever been so direct about how they felt when their civilians were targeted. The next day, the council chamber was even more crowded. Word had spread about the human perspective. Representatives who had not attended before now filled every seat. The air felt thick with tension. Lord Vaxtor took his place, but he looked troubled. The old archivist stood by his side, holding an object that looked like a crystal cube. Yeah. Council will come to order, said Vaxtor. His voice was less certain than before. We have reviewed the human statements. We have consulted our oldest laws. He gestured to the archivist. Zanvor, show them. The old Tarvaxian held up the crystal cube. It began to glow, and an image appeared above it. Strange symbols floated in the air, then changed into different languages as the translation system worked. From the first code, written before our people left our home world, read Zanvor. The true warrior faces only those who can fight back. The one who harms the young, the sick, the peaceful has no honor. Their name shall be forgotten. Their deeds shall be erased. A sound like a giant breath being taken filled the chamber. If these words are true, and they come from our most sacred text, said Lord Vaxtor slowly, then much of our history must be reconsidered. Susan stood up. She had not been called to speak, but the moment felt too important to stay silent. Lord Chancellor, she said, perhaps together we can find a new way forward, one that honors both our peoples. Vaxtor looked at her with his 6 eyes. For the first time there was something like respect in his gaze. Perhaps human, he said. Perhaps we can. The days that followed were unlike any in the history of the Tarvaxian Empire. The Great Council stayed in session for hours each day. Representatives from hundreds of species spoke about their first contacts with the Empire. Many told stories similar to what had happened to Earth in the Zextel. Susan spent her time meeting with groups of younger Tarvaxian nobles. They seemed the most troubled by what they were learning. If what you and the ancient codes say is true, said a young Tarvaxian named Kexavar, then our entire way of war is wrong. Our history would need to be rewritten. Susan sat with 6 of them in a small meeting room. Kexavar was the youngest, his blue skin bright and clear. He wore the simple uniform of a military officer in training. It's not about right or wrong, Susan said carefully. It's about different values, different ways of seeing the world. Another Tarvaxian shook his head. All 6 of his yellow eyes blinked at different times. No, human. Our oldest laws are clear. We have strayed from our true path. We have done terrible things. Susan watched them struggle with this new understanding. It was hard not to feel sorry for them. Their whole view of themselves and their history was changing. Perhaps, she said, we can learn from each other. Humans have made many mistakes. In our history, too. We've fought wars the wrong way. We've hurt people we shouldn't have hurt, but we learned. We changed. Kexvar looked at her with interest. How? How did you change? Susan thought about it. Slowly, with many arguments, with new laws, with people speaking up when they saw something wrong. She smiled a little. It's not easy to change a culture, But it can be done. On Earth, Lisa Wright made another discovery. She called General Allen and Dr. Kevin to her computer right away. "Look at this," she said, pointing to her screen. "I found it in the archives that Susan has been given access to. It's a record of a species called the Naxvori. They were contacted by the Tarvaxians about 50 years ago." Allen leaned over her shoulder. "What's special about them?" "They responded differently to the Tarvaxian attack," said Lisa. "When the Tarvaxians destroyed their civilian ships, the Naxvori sent a message. They said that the Tarvaxians had shown great mercy by sparing their warriors and targeting only civilians." Kevin's eyes widened. "They played along with the Tarvaxian view." "Exactly," said Lisa. "And look what happened next. The Tarvaxians immediately stopped attacking. They invited the Naxvori to join the Empire as equals, not as a conquered people." Allen straightened up. "So if a species acts like they share the Tarvaxian values, the Tarvaxians treat them with respect." "It seems that way," said Lisa. "But the Naxvori are the only ones who ever figured this out." "We need to tell Susan," said Allen. "This could change our approach." He walked to the communication room to call Susan, but before he could, an alarm sounded throughout the base. Red lights flashed on the walls. "What's happening?" he demanded as he ran back to the main room. "Sir?" called an officer at the radar station. "We have multiple ships entering our solar system. They're Tarvaxian design." Allen's face went hard. "How many?" "3, sir. Small ones. Not warships." Allen relaxed slightly. "Put them on screen." The large screen at the front of the room showed 3 sleek ships moving past the orbit of Neptune. They were blue and silver with smooth lines. They didn't look like the massive battle cruisers they had seen in the Tarvaxian military records. "They're sending a message," said the communications officer. The image on the screen changed. A Tarvaxian face appeared. It was the old archivist, Zanvor. "People of Earth," he said. His voice was calm. "We come in peace. We bring news from your ambassador Miller, and we bring—" He paused. "We bring survivors." The whole room went silent. "Survivors," Allen repeated. "From the colony ships?" "Yes," said Zanvor. 314 humans were found in survival pods, mostly children. They have been in our medical facilities. They are well. We are bringing them home." Lisa covered her mouth with her hand. Tears filled her eyes. "Tell them they are welcome," said Allen, his voice rough with emotion. "Send coordinates for a landing site." On the council station, Susan received the news from Lord Vaxter himself. He came to her quarters, something no High Chancellor had ever done before. "We found them 2 months ago," he said, "in the debris field where the ships were destroyed. The survival pods were designed well. They kept the humans alive until our patrols found them." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" asked Susan. Her hands were shaking. "At first, we did not understand." "Their importance," said Vaxter. "They were not warriors. We thought they were less important." He looked down. "We were wrong." Susan sat down hard on her bed. 300 survivors, out of 50,000. Yes, it is a small number, but they live, and they can tell their story. Vaxter made a gesture with his long fingers. "The Council has made a decision. It is unprecedented, but these are unprecedented times. We offer reparations to Earth, and we offer membership in the Empire, not as a subject world, but as a free associate." Susan looked up at him. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you keep your independence. Your government, your military, but you gain our protection, access to our technology, our trade routes." Vaxter's outer eyes closed briefly. "And we ask for your help." "Our help?" "Yes, to understand, to help us find a better way forward." He gestured to the door. "Many species in the Empire are now questioning their place, their history. The young ones especially are disturbed by what they have learned. We need guidance to find a new path." Susan stood up. "I'll have to discuss this with my government. But speaking personally, I think we can help each other if you're truly willing to change." Baxter nodded slowly. Change is difficult but sometimes necessary. Your simple words about homes and families have started something, Ambassador Miller. Something that cannot be stopped. Susan thought about the survivors heading home to Earth. Children who had lost their parents. People who had lost everything but their lives. There was a long way to go before humans could truly forgive the Tarvaxians. But it was a start. We'll find a way forward together, she said. One step at a time. 3 months later, Susan stood on the observation deck of the Earth ship USS Horizon. It was the newest and largest ship humans had built, designed not for war but for diplomacy. Through the wide window, she watched as ships from 40 different species arrived for the first meeting of what they were calling the Galactic Cooperative. The view was beautiful. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved slowly against the backdrop of stars. Some were smooth and round. Others were all sharp angles. Some glowed with strange lights. All of them carried representatives who had once been part of the Tarvaxian Empire. "Not bad for your first diplomatic mission," said Alan, coming to stand beside her. "You toppled an empire without firing a shot." Susan shook her head. "I didn't topple anything. I just pointed out a misunderstanding. They're the ones who had the courage to face their history and change." And change they had. In the 3 months since the revelation about civilian targets, the mighty Tarvaxian Empire had begun to transform itself. The younger generation, led by Kexavar and others like him, had pushed for major reforms. They had withdrawn military forces from many systems. They had apologized to subject species. They had offered freedom to any who wanted it. Not all Tarvaxians agreed with these changes. Some of the older military leaders had resisted. There had been arguments, even some fighting, but the ancient codes that Zanvor had found carried great weight, and the shame of realizing what they had done to so many civilian populations was powerful. "Ambassador Miller," called a crew member. "The Tarvaxian delegation has arrived." Susan nodded. "Thank you. I'll meet them in the main conference room." She and Alan walked through the wide corridors of the Horizon. Crew members nodded, respectfully as they passed. Many stopped to watch Susan. She had become famous on Earth, the woman who changed the galaxy with a few simple words about homes and families. In the main conference room, a group of Tarvaxians waited. Kexavar was at the front, now wearing the formal robes of a senior diplomat. Behind him stood Zanvor, the old archivist, and several other Tarvaxians of different ages. "Ambassador Miller," said Kexavar, bowing slightly. "General Foster, thank you for hosting this historic meeting." "Welcome aboard the Horizon," said Susan. "We're honored to have you here." Kexavar looked around at the room, which was filled with representatives from many species. Some had been part of the Empire for thousands of years, others for just a few centuries. All were now trying to find a new way forward. "We have completed our review of historical actions against emerging civilizations," said Kexavar. "We found 17 species who were nearly wiped out by our honorable attacks on their civilian vessels and colonies." Susan felt a coldness in her stomach. 17 species. How many billions of individuals had died because of this terrible misunderstanding? 7 of these species have survivors we can help return to their homeworlds, continued Kexavar. The others, he didn't finish, he didn't need to. "We will help however we can," said Susan. "Earth is still new to space travel, but we're learning quickly." "Yes, you are," said Zanvor. The old archivist stepped forward. "In all my years, I never thought I would see such change. It gives me hope for the future." The conference began soon after. Representatives from all 40 species gathered around a large table. There were many different body types, so special chairs and platforms had been built to accommodate everyone. Translation devices helped them all understand each other. Susan watched as they began to talk about borders, about trade, about how to share technology, about how to prevent future misunderstandings. Some voices were angry, some were hopeful. All had ideas about what should come next. "It won't be easy," said Alan quietly. "Some of these species have good reasons to hate the Tarvaxians." "Yes," agreed Susan. "But they're here, talking instead." of fighting. That's a start. Later that day, Susan met privately with a human family. They were 3 of the survivors from the colony ships, a mother named Mary, her teenage son Jack, and her young daughter Beth. All 3 looked healthy, but Susan could see sadness in their eyes. "We wanted to thank you," said Mary, "for everything you've done, for making them understand what they did to us." Susan shook her head. "I'm just glad you survived. We all thought everyone was lost." "Most were," said Jack. His voice was bitter. "My father, my friends, almost everyone." "I know," said Susan. "I'm so sorry." "But we're going back," said Beth. She was about 8 years old, with curly brown hair, back to Epsilon Eridani. "The Tarvaxians said we can still have that system. They're going to help us build a new colony there." Susan looked surprised. "You want to go back? After everything that happened?" Mary nodded. "It was our dream, Tim's and mine, to build something new, to start fresh." Her eyes grew wet. "Tim is gone, but the dream isn't. And now the children from all 3 ships who survived, they'll have a home. The home we were trying to reach." As Earth took its place in the galactic community, humanity's unusual perspective, valuing civilian life above military, spread throughout the former empire. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years began to talk to each other, to trade, to share knowledge and resources. 6 months after the first meeting of the Galactic Cooperative, a memorial was built in orbit around Epsilon Eridani. It was a simple structure, a large ring made of metal from all the worlds in the cooperative. In the center floated a hologram showing the names of everyone who had died in the colony ships. Susan stood with Kexavar, watching as the memorial was activated for the first time. The names glowed softly in the darkness of space. "We will remember," said Kexavar. "We will learn. We will be better." Susan nodded. The simple statement of a human diplomat about attacking our home had fundamentally altered the course of galactic civilization, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapons are not weapons at all, but ideas. Ideas like home, family, peace. "Yes," she said. "We will all be better."